My husband praised my company at dinner. He looked right at me across the table, completely unaware, and said, and I am quoting him exactly, "These people are the best analytics firm I have ever seen. I don't know how we found them, but they are exactly what we needed." I smiled. I said, "That's great, honey. Sounds like a good vendor." Then I picked up my fork and kept eating. He had no idea he was talking about the company I built. He had no idea he had spent 3 weeks writing emails to his vice president personally recommending my firm for a contract. He had no idea that the nearly $500,000 deal he had championed, the one he was so proud of, had deposited money directly into accounts he did not know existed. He had no idea, because I had never told him. My name is Sloane Carter. I am 27 years old. My husband, Derek, believed for the entire 3 years of our marriage that I did small contract data work from home. He believed I pieced together a modest income project by project. He believed, in the quiet and unexamined way that people believe things they have never thought to question, that I was someone whose professional life fit neatly inside the small space he had imagined for it. He was wrong. I am the founder and CEO of Carter Precision Analytics, a data intelligence firm with offices in Nashville and Dallas, 19 full-time employees, and $5.8 million in annual revenue. I started it when I was 21 years old, working nights at a hotel front desk to save enough money to buy the computer I built it on. Derek knew none of this. Not because I forgot to tell him. Because I made a choice, early, deliberately, and for reasons I thought were protecting me, to keep the most important part of myself locked behind a door he was never allowed to open. And this is the story of what happened the day that door finally came off its hinges. All of it. Every last thing. Before I tell you about Derek, let me tell you who I actually was while he thought he knew me. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. My dad left when I was 9. My mother, June, raised me alone on a real estate agent's income and a stubbornness I have been grateful for every day of my adult life. She did not complain. She did not explain herself to people who underestimated her. She just kept building. I watched that, and I learned it. I moved to Nashville at 18 on a partial scholarship and worked nights at a downtown hotel front desk to cover what the scholarship did not. I graduated with a computer science degree and approximately $4,000 in savings and an idea I could not stop thinking about. The idea was this. Mid-sized companies in manufacturing and healthcare were making supply chain decisions on incomplete data, and nobody was building the right tools to fix that. I believed I could build those tools. I believed it the way you believe things that come from somewhere deeper than logic, in the bones, in the chest, without proof. I started Carter Precision Analytics at 21 in the spare bedroom of my first apartment. The computer overheated if I used it for more than 2 hours without a fan underneath it. My business partner and closest friend, Claire, handled operations. I handled everything else. By the time I was 23, we had our first 6-figure contract. By the time I was 25, we had a second office in Dallas and 19 employees. By the time I met Derek, Carter Precision was already the company it is now. He just never knew that. Because from the very first conversation we had, I made sure he wouldn't. Derek and I met at a corporate networking event at the Omni Hotel downtown. I had gone because a potential client had invited me. I stayed because the appetizers were genuinely good and the live music was better than I expected from a Tuesday night in a hotel ballroom. Derek was a regional sales director at a mid-sized consulting and business services firm called Hartwell Group. He was 30 years old, tall, easy in a room the way naturally confident people are, not performing confidence, just comfortable in his own space. He came over to refill his drink at the same moment I did and said, with a genuinely self-aware smile, that he had been watching me hold the same glass of water for 40 minutes without drinking it and was everything okay. I laughed. I told him I was just thinking. About what, he said. Whether staying was the right call, I said. And he said. Jury is still out, I said. He laughed. Not a polite laugh, the real kind, the kind that arrives without warning. I like honest people, he said. Most people at these things are performing. I thought, so am I. Just not in the way you mean. But I didn't say that. I said I agreed. We talked for an hour. He was warm and curious, and he listened in a way that felt genuine. When he asked what I did, I said I did data analytics consulting for businesses. He said that sounded interesting. He asked one follow-up question, which I answered briefly, and then the conversation moved on. He asked for my number before I left. I gave it to him. 9 months later, he asked me to marry him. I said yes, without hesitation. That was the last decision in our marriage I made without fear underneath it. He proposed on a Tuesday evening in November. We were at home. I was making soup. He came in from the living room, sat at the kitchen island, and watched me for a moment with an expression I couldn't read. Then he said, "Sloan, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Not because everything is easy, I know it isn't always, but because you make me want to be better at paying attention. And I don't want to stop doing that." He had written it on a piece of paper. He read it from the paper because he was nervous and his hands weren't entirely steady. That was the most honest thing about him. When it mattered, he showed the nerves. I said yes before he finished that we married 4 months later. Small ceremony. 40 people. Clara's my maid of honor. My mother flying in from Charlotte. A cold, clear February light that made everything look like it meant something. For a year and a half, our marriage was genuinely good. He was thoughtful and present, and the laugh still arrived the same way it had at the hotel, without announcing itself, just there. I kept the company in the back room. He kept not asking. We were both working around a blank space neither of us named. I told myself we were happy. We were. For a while. In the way that something can be happy while it is also slowly running out of what it needs to stay alive. I did not see it ending. I was too busy holding everything together to notice it coming apart. Here's the part people always want to understand. Why didn't I just tell him? The honest answer starts with someone named Tyler. Before Derek, when I was 23 and Carter Precision was 2 years old, I was with a man who seemed, for the first several months, like exactly the right person. Smart, confident, the kind of man who made you feel seen and safe at the same time, which is a combination that makes it very hard to think clearly. When Tyler understood what Carter Precision actually was, when the revenue numbers and the client list and the trajectory of the company became undeniable, he changed. Not dramatically. That would have been easier. He changed gradually, the way metal corrodes, a little duller each day, until one morning the shine is simply gone. He started calling the company my side project. He made jokes about my income at dinner with friends, small jokes, the kind he could call oversensitivity if I pushed back. He suggested I was working too hard for someone our age. He implied, in the patient and persistent way of someone who has decided something, that what I was missing was more time built around him. I ended it before the year was out, but it left something in me. A wariness I mistook for wisdom. I decided. The next time I let someone close, the company stays separate. It stays behind a door they don't know exists. Not as a lie. As protection. I built a cover story that was technically true the way a photograph is technically the whole room. I do data analytics consulting on a contract basis. Small scale. Project by project. It worked. Every relationship after Tyler stayed clean and uncomplicated. It also stayed incomplete. I was 24 when I met Derek, and I was still running the Tyler playbook, and I was still completely sure I was being smart about it. That was my first mistake. It would not be my last. The changes in Derek were not sudden. They never are with men like him. In year 2, Derek was passed over for a vice president position at Hartwell Group. The promotion went to a colleague who had been there less time but landed a high-visibility account. Derek took it professionally in public. At home, he became someone I had not signed up for. He went quiet in the particular way that is not peace, the way that is actually noise turned inward. He was short at dinner and absent on weekends. He answered questions with the minimum required and listened to my side of conversations with expression of someone waiting for the topic to return to something he cared about. I tried to help. I had a contact at a better firm, a senior director named Paul who was looking for someone with exactly Derek's background. I brought it up carefully, framing it as something I had happened to hear about. Derek looked at me across the table and went completely still. "You think I need you to find me opportunities?" he said. "I think it might be worth a call," I said. "Sloan." His voice was flat. "I am not a project." He did not speak to me with real warmth for the rest of that week. I let it go. My home office had quietly become a storage room for every conversation I could not figure out how to finish. By year 3, Derek had developed a particular way of speaking to me that I can only describe as dismissive. He cut into my sentences at dinner when he found them less interesting than what he wanted to say. He corrected me on small facts in front of friends with a gentle, half-apologetic smile that communicated, "She means well." Once, at a dinner with 2 of his colleagues, someone asked what kind of analytics work I did. Before I could open my mouth, Derek said, "Contract stuff. Small scale. She's good at the detail work." Warmly. Proudly. I sat there with my wine glass and my $5.8 million company and said something modest and smiled. My mother, June, drove up from Charlotte that October. On her second evening, while Derek was watching something in the other room, she sat with me at the kitchen table and said, very quietly, "He doesn't know, does he?" Not a question. "No," I said. She looked at me. "How long are you going to do this to yourself, Sloan?" I didn't answer. But I sat with that question for a very long time. And I began, for the first time, to notice things I had been choosing not to see. Derek lost his job in April. Hartwell Group announced a restructuring. His entire division was eliminated. He came home that afternoon and sat at the kitchen table without speaking for almost 30 minutes. I made coffee. I sat across from him. I waited. "They cut the whole division," he finally said. "I'm so sorry," I said. And I meant it. What followed were the 4 hardest months of our marriage. Derek sank into a low, quiet erosion of purpose that made every room feel slightly smaller. He applied for jobs in slow, uneven bursts. He slept late. He was short-tempered on weekends. He was present in body and somewhere else entirely in every way that mattered. I paid everything. The mortgage on the house, which was in my name alone, which I had bought with Carter Precision Funds the year before we met, and which we had never retitled after the wedding. His car payment. The insurance. The groceries. His gym membership that he still paid for but barely used. I did it all quietly, from accounts he had never seen. He assumed we were surviving on savings. He never once asked how we were managing it. He thanked me once. He used the word steady. Then he moved on. I thought about that word for a long time. Steady. Like I was furniture. Like the financial foundation of our entire shared life was simply a feature of the house rather than something I was actively, daily, quietly building. One evening, I came out of my home office after 8 hours of back-to-back calls, a contract crisis in Dallas, a hiring decision, a quarterly report due before morning, and Derek was on the couch watching something he had already seen twice, completely at ease. I stood in the doorway. I thought, I just spent 8 hours managing a company with 19 people in it. And I am managing this man's feelings so carefully, he doesn't even know he is being managed. Something shifted in me that night. Not anger, clarity, cold, clean, and permanent. Before I could act on any of it, my body made a decision I had not authorized. I had been running at a sustained level of stress for months. The company, the marriage, the weight of 2 separate lives in the same body. And I had been treating my own health the way I treated everything without a deadline. I would get to it later. There is no later. The body does not wait. On a Tuesday morning in March, I was in my home office on a call with our Dallas team when I felt a sudden, strange flutter in my chest. Like something inside it had briefly lost its footing. Then dizziness. Then a cold wave from my head downward. I excused myself from the call. I sat on the floor with my back against the desk and focused on breathing until the room felt level again. I called my doctor that afternoon. The tests came back flagging an irregular electrical signal in my heart, a condition called supraventricular tachycardia, present at low levels for some time, and now, under months of sustained stress, reaching a threshold that required correction. The MY cardiologist, Dr. Merritt, was calm and direct. "You need a catheter ablation procedure," she said. "Minimally invasive, very effective. But I need you to schedule it within the next 4 to 6 weeks. And the stress you are carrying, I am not giving you lifestyle advice. I am giving you a medical instruction. Something has to change." I thanked her. I took my notes. I walked to my car and sat in the parking lot with my hands in my lap. I thought about timing. about how the universe had apparently formed strong opinions about the order in which I was going to handle the things I had been putting off. Then I texted my attorney, Diane, medical situation. Need to accelerate everything. Will explain tomorrow. Then I drove home, because Derek would be back by 6 and dinner was not going to make itself. He was having an affair. I did not know that yet, but I was about to find out. 3 months after the layoff, Derek found new work at a technology services firm called Pinnacle Solutions. He came back to himself in the first few weeks, lighter, more present, cooking dinner on Fridays. I let myself believe we had turned a corner. Then, about 6 weeks in, the phone behavior started. Derek had always been casual with his phone. Face up on the counter, unbothered, the way people are when they have nothing to manage. Now it went face down when he said it anywhere. Now he angled away when messages came in. Now there were calls taken in the garage in a low voice, described afterward as work stuff. Same 2 words every time, same brevity that closed the conversation before it could begin. He started working late on Wednesdays and Fridays. A new client in Memphis, he said. Extra attention required. On those nights, he always showered the moment he got home. He used to shower in the morning. One Friday, he told me he was going to bed early. When I came out of my office at 10:30, the house was silent. His side of the bed was empty. His car was in the driveway. 20 minutes later, the front door opened. He said he had gone for a walk. In March? I said. Just needed some air, he said. I said goodnight. I went to bed. I lay in the dark and let all the small filed-away things arrange themselves into the shape they had always been forming. The turn screen. The cologne on ordinary Tuesdays. The new distance in his eyes when he looked at me, like he was looking from somewhere farther away than the same room. I did not cry. I made a decision. The next morning I called my attorney and asked her to recommend a private investigator. Her name was Diane, and she did not even ask why his name was Ray. Diane had used him in a corporate fraud case 2 years earlier. Careful, discreet, and thorough in exactly equal measure, she said. I met him at a coffee shop on the east side during a window of time I described to Derek as a client meeting. Ray was a compact man in his 50s with the particular manner of someone who has spent a career working near difficult truths and has developed a very clean relationship with them. I told him what I needed. Movement records, Wednesday and Friday evenings, for 3 weeks. Are you prepared for what I might find? He asked. I've been preparing for 2 months, I said. I just need it documented. He delivered the report 17 days later. I read it in my home office on a Monday morning before Derek was awake. Her name was Brooke, 25 years old. Account manager at Pinnacle Solutions, the same firm Derek had been working at for less than 2 months. Ray's report included timestamps and photographs, the 2 of them leaving the Pinnacle offices together on a Wednesday evening, dinner at a restaurant in Midtown Nashville, her car parked outside an apartment complex in Germantown on 2 separate Friday nights for more than 2 hours each time. Ray's closing sentence was plain. The nature of the observed relationship does not appear to be professional. I set the report on my desk. Outside the window, the yard was still and ordinary. A bird landed on the fence post and sat for a moment and then was gone. I felt no dramatic wave. No storm in my chest. Just a cold, flat calm. The kind that arrives when something you have suspected is confirmed and the uncertainty, which was always the heaviest part, is finally lifted. I walked Derek to the front door with his coffee at 7:30. Have a good day, I said. He said he would. He kissed my cheek. I watched his car pull out of the driveway. Then I went back inside and called Diane. It was time. Diane and I met 3 times over the following 2 weeks in her downtown office, during hours when Derek thought I was at client lunches. I told her everything. All of it, for the first time in one room without compression. The company, 6 years old, 19 employees, offices in Nashville and Dallas, 5.8 million in annual revenue, growing. The house, which I had purchased the year before the wedding with Carter Precision Funds, solely in my name, mortgage paid entirely from my personal accounts since the day I bought it. Derek had moved into my house as my husband and had never once looked at whose name was on the deed. The accounts he had never seen. The business structure my accountant had built before the marriage. The complete financial separation that had simply never been changed because I had simply never changed it. When I finished, Diane was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Sloan, I have been your company's attorney for 4 years. I have reviewed every contract this firm has signed. And this is the first time I have felt like I am talking to the complete version of you." I did not answer for a moment. "I know," I said. "I'm working on that." She laid out the legal picture. The house, my name alone, premarital purchase, 0 contribution by Derek. His legal claim under Tennessee property law, nil. Carter Precision Analytics, separate entity, founded 3 years before the marriage. All assets entirely mine. Derek had never been named in any document, never contributed any capital, never existed anywhere in the corporate structure. Joint account, $12,000 in shared household expenses. That was everything. "That is the complete extent of what he thinks he is divorcing into," Diane said. "I know," I said. "You are in an exceptionally strong position," she said. "I know that too. I just need everything documented and locked down before he realizes what position he is actually standing in." I told Derek about the cardiac procedure the way I had learned to tell him things I needed him to know, but did not expect him to engage with. "A small heart procedure," I said. "Corrective. Routine. Dr. Merritt has done hundreds of them. I'll be home the same day." He was at the kitchen counter scrolling through his phone. He looked up. "Your heart," he said. "An electrical thing. Present since childhood, probably. Just needs to be corrected now." He looked at me for a moment. Then, "Do you need me to drive you?" "Not. I'll take you." "Not. Tell me more about what this means." "Not. Are you scared?" "Do you need me to drive you?" With a flat, helpful inflection of someone asking whether they need to move a meeting. "Claire's taking me," I said. Which was true. My business partner had offered without being asked, because that is what people do when they actually see you. "Okay," he said. He went back to his phone. That night I lay in bed beside him and thought about the man who had read from a piece of paper 3 years ago with shaking hands and said he wanted to spend his life getting better at paying attention. I looked for that man in the person sleeping next to me. The distance between who he had been and who he had become was the saddest geography I had ever tried to map. The procedure was 2 weeks later. Dr. Merritt was excellent. Claire drove me home, made soup from scratch, sat with me through 3 episodes of a show we both loved, and asked nothing I was not ready to answer. Derek came home at 8. He asked how I felt. I said fine. He heated up some soup. He went downstairs to watch television. I lay in the bedroom ceiling staring at the ceiling and thought, I just had a cardiac procedure. My company is worth millions. My husband thinks I am fine and small and manageable. And every single one of us is completely wrong about something. 2 days later, I called Diane. "Everything is in place," I said. "I'm ready. Filing prepared by end of week," she said. "Now I need to tell you about the Hartwell connection, because this is the part that made my own attorney go quiet for 3 full seconds before she spoke. 14 months before any of this reached its conclusion, Hartwell Group, Derek's old employer, the company that had laid him off, reached out to Carter Precision Analytics about a data intelligence contract. They needed AI-powered supply chain analytics for their consulting division. It was a 12-month engagement worth $480,000. My operations director handled the pitch under our holding company name, Precision Data Partners, which was how we always structured contracts when I wanted distance between my personal identity and the firm. Hartwell signed. It became one of our largest accounts. What I did not discover until I reviewed the contract files after hiring Ray was the name of the person who had championed our proposal internally, the person who had written 3 separate emails to his VP recommending us, the person whose advocacy had essentially secured the deal. It was Derek. Derek, at that time still employed at Hartwell, had attended meetings where Carter Precision's work was being evaluated. He had forwarded our capability documents with personal annotations. He had written to his VP. "This is the best analytics firm I have seen come across my desk. I strongly recommend we move forward." 3 emails. His name. His professional endorsement. He had come home one evening during that period. I remember exactly where I was standing at the kitchen counter, cutting a pepper, and said, "Sloan, we brought in this data firm at work, and honestly, these people are the best I've ever seen. I have no idea how we found them, but I pushed hard for this contract, and I am really glad we got it." I said, "That's great, honey. Sounds like a good vendor." I picked up my fork and kept eating. He had no idea. Not one idea. He had sat across from me. The person who built that firm, who ran that firm, who had been running that firm for 6 years inside the same house where he slept, and praised us to my face. He had helped us win a nearly $500,000 contract. He had been the deciding voice for his own wife's company. And he had never, not once, connected a single. When I explained this to Diane in her office, she was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said, "We are including every one of those emails in the filing." "Every single one?" I said. Derek came to me on a Sunday morning and asked for the divorce. He had prepared. You could see it in the set of his shoulders, the deliberate placement of his hands on the table, the clean shirt he had put on. He had made coffee. He only made coffee on Sundays when something was about to happen. "Sloan," he said, "I have been thinking seriously about where we are. I think we have grown into two different people who want different things. I think the honest and kind thing for both of us is to acknowledge that and move forward." Clean, rehearsed, delivered. Then he said, "I've already spoken to a lawyer. The house will need to be sold. We split what we have. It doesn't have to be complicated." The house said, as if it had ever been a shared thing, as if he had paid a single mortgage payment on it, as if he had ever, in 3 years of living there, thought to ask whose name was on the deed. "It doesn't have to be complicated," said as if he had the faintest idea what was sitting in Diane's filing drawer with his name on the front. I looked at him across the table. 1 beat of silence. "Okay," I said. He blinked. He had expected something. Tears, maybe. Anger. Pleading. The kind of desperate pushback that lets a person feel like they were worth fighting for. "I'll have Diane reach out to your attorney," I said. I picked up my coffee. I took a sip. I set it down. "That's it," he said. "He got none of it." "You asked for a divorce," I said. I agreed. "That's what agreeing looks like." I stood up and went to the window. Outside, the yard was beginning to come back from winter. The first pale green at the tips of things. Slow. Patient. The return of something that had been there all along, just waiting for the right conditions to show itself. I thought, me too. Derek's attorney was a man named Scott who had apparently been told this was a simple division of modest shared assets. He sent his initial letter to Diane within 4 days. Equal split of home equity. 50-50 on joint savings. Declaration of no other significant marital property. Diane called me after reading it. "He believes this is uncomplicated," she said. "He has always believed that about things he hadn't actually looked at," I said. "File everything." Our response went to Scott the following Thursday morning. It opened with the house. Deed in my name alone. Purchased 1 year before the marriage. Mortgage funded entirely from my personal accounts throughout our entire marriage. Under Tennessee property law, given the premarital purchase and the complete absence of any financial contribution by Derek, his legal claim on the property was nil. It then addressed Carter Precision Analytics in full. Founding date. Revenue. Client base. $5.8 million annually. All assets entirely mine, predating the marriage by 3 years. Derek had never been named in a single company document, never contributed capital, never appeared anywhere in the corporate structure. It noted the joint checking account, $12,000, to be split evenly. IT attached Ray's investigative report as an exhibit. And at the back, because Diane is meticulous and because the irony was legally relevant, it attached every one of Derek's Hartwell emails. The ones recommending Carter Precision. The ones praising my firm to his VP. The ones that had helped deliver a $480,000 contract to the company he did not know his wife ran. Scott called Diane 45 minutes after delivery. Diane called me at noon. "He sounded," she said, with the contained precision of a woman choosing words very carefully, as though the floor had moved beneath him. "Good," I said. It had, she said. He came home at 2 in the afternoon. I was at the kitchen table with my laptop, reviewing a contract report. He came through the front door holding the envelope. His face had gone a flat, colorless gray. Not pale, not flushed, but the specific gray of something that has had its foundation removed. He set the papers on the table without saying anything. Then he said, "Carter Precision Analytics." "Yes," I said. "That's your company." "It is. It earns," he looked down at the filing, $5.8 million a year. "Last year," I said. "We're tracking higher this year." He sat down. Not slowly, suddenly, like standing had become a decision his body could no longer maintain. "How long?" he said. "I founded it 6 years ago," I said. "I was 21. It was 3 years old when we met. It has been running the entire time we have been together." He stared at the papers. Then he looked up. "The Hartwell contract," he said, dilated. "The analytics firm I championed last year. I told my VP they were the best vendor I'd ever seen. I sent 3 emails. I pushed that contract through." He stopped. "That was your company." "That was my company," I said. "Yes. I came home and told you about it at dinner." "You did. You said they were the best you'd ever seen. And you said that it sounded like a great vendor," I said. And then I picked up my fork. He pressed both hands flat on the table. He looked like a man who has been given the blueprints to a building he thought he had understood, and none of the walls are where he believed. "I thought you had nothing," he said. Almost a whisper. "I know," I said. "I thought your work was small," I said. "I know you did. That is exactly the problem." I placed Ray's report on the table. Derek looked at it. He did not touch it. "I know about Brooke," I said. "I know about the Wednesday nights. I know about the Germantown apartment. Ray is thorough. The report covers 6 weeks. Diane has already filed it." He exhaled. Not a sigh. Something emptier than a sigh. "I wasn't trying to," he stopped. "Hurt me," I finished. "I know. But you did. And I need you to know that I know." He looked at the table for a long time. Then, "Would any of this have been different if you had told me about the company from the beginning?" I thought about that honestly because it deserved an honest answer. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it would have become someone else faster. I had a relationship before you where the money changed everything the moment he understood it. I decided after that to keep the company behind a wall. I told myself it was protection. I told myself I was being smart. What I was actually doing was deciding it was safer to be underestimated by someone I loved than to find out whether he was capable of standing beside me at my real size." "That was my mistake," I said. "Not the company. The decision to be only half known by the person I had chosen to build a life with. That wasn't fair to either of us." He looked at me with something in his face I had not seen before. Something open. Something not yet fully formed but moving in the direction of honesty. "I never looked closely enough," he said. "No," I said. "You didn't. And I made it easy not to. We both have to own our parts of that." It was, I thought, the most honest conversation we had ever had. It arrived 3 years and a divorce filing too late. But it arrived. And something in me was glad it did. Scott made 3 attempts. His first, that Derek's years of domestic contribution during the marriage entitled him to a share of Carter Precision's earnings. Diane responded in 2 paragraphs. Premarital founding. Clean account separation. 0 financial contribution by Derek. Relevant Tennessee precedents. Done. His second, that Derek's internal advocacy for the Hartwell contract constituted a business development contribution to Carter Precision, entitling him to a portion of that revenue. Diane's response was 1 paragraph. Derek had no knowledge of the firm's ownership. No referral agreement existed. The contract had been won through a competitive pitch on Carter Precision's own merits. The advocate's ignorance of the ownership structure made the contribution claim legally incoherent. Done. His third, that the financial discrepancy between the marriage's apparent assets and its actual ones constituted undisclosed concealment the court should consider. Diane noted that no legal obligation to disclose premarital separately held assets existed in Tennessee, that every dollar of Carter Precision's revenue had been properly reported to tax authorities under my name throughout the marriage, and that Derek had never been represented in any corporate document. She cited 4 relevant cases.
Done.
Scott stopped. Something else was also happening at Pinnacle Solutions. Ray's supplementary report had documented Derek's use of company time and resources to communicate with Brooke, calendar blocks logged as client meetings with no corresponding files, emails sent from his work account during business hours. Diane had forwarded the relevant records to Pinnacle's HR department as part of our standard disclosure. 2 weeks after our filing, Derek was placed on administrative review. He did not tell me. I found out from Claire, who had heard through a professional contact. I thanked her. I went back to work. The work, as always, was there. He called on a Thursday night at 10:30. I was at my desk finishing a contract review. The house was quiet. The lamp made a warm circle on the papers. I answered. "They're letting me go," he said. All the usual ease was gone from his voice. Just the facts. Just a man who had run completely out of room. "I heard they were reviewing it," I said. "I need you to know," he stopped. Started again. "I know there is nothing I can say that makes any of this better. But I need you to know that what we had at the beginning, the note, the soup kitchen, all of it, that was real. I was real, then. I need you to know that." "I know it was," I said. "I've always known that. That's not the part I'm grieving." "What are you grieving?" I thought about it for a moment. "That you saw a small version of me and decided that was enough," I said. "That you stopped being curious. That I made it so easy for you to stop, and you let me. That the man who proposed because he wanted to get better at paying attention stopped paying attention."
He was quiet for a long time.
"Is there any part of this that can still be fixed?" he said. I looked out the window at the dark backyard. The rocking chairs on the porch, I never used enough. The yard that was beginning to get its color back. "The papers are filed, Derek," I said. "And I am at peace with that." "Good night, Sloan," he said. "Good night," I said. I set the phone down. The lamp. The papers. The quiet. I turned off the light and went to bed. And for the first time in a very long time, I did not lie awake. I just slept. The final hearing was on a Wednesday morning in May. We arrived separately. Derek was already in the hallway with Scott when Diane and I came through the courthouse doors. He was wearing a gray jacket I had bought him for his birthday 2 years ago. I noticed it, and then made myself stop noticing it. The hearing took 32 minutes. Agreed terms. No disputes. The judge reviewed everything, confirmed both parties understood the order, and signed. We walked out into a warm May morning, not by arrangement, just because the exit was the same door. On the courthouse steps, Derek stopped. "Sloan." I stopped. He looked like the version of himself I had first been drawn to, tired, a little underprepared, but present. Genuinely there. That had always been his best quality, when he remembered to use it. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not for the legal outcome. For not paying attention. For deciding I already knew the shape of you, without ever actually looking. I made you smaller in my mind because it was easier than seeing what you actually were. I am sorry for that." I looked at him. "I know," I said. "And I'm sorry too. For making it easy. For deciding it was safer to be underestimated than fully known. That wasn't fair to you, or to me." We stood on those steps for one more moment. Two people who had genuinely liked each other once and had built, around that liking, a structure that could not hold what was actually inside it. Then he went down the steps. I turned and walked the other way. Diane fell into step beside me. "Lunch," she said. "Absolutely," I said. We walked into the sunshine. And I did not look back. Not because I was angry. Because there was nothing back there I needed anymore. Claire took me to dinner that evening at a place we both loved in the Gulch. Not a celebration. She knew better than to frame it that way. Just a good dinner, good wine on a Wednesday that did not require it, and the kind of conversation that covers a great deal of ground without needing to arrive anywhere specific. She told me about a client pitch she was leading. Her sister had gotten into nursing school. She had finally signed up for the pottery class she had been talking about for 2 years. which neither of us could picture, and which made both of us laugh so hard the table next to us looked over. Near the end of the evening, she said, "Can I say something I've been holding for a long time?" "Please," I said. "I watched you manage Derek for 3 years," she said. "Watched you make yourself smaller every time he was in the room. And I kept thinking, she is the most capable person I have ever known, and she is spending half of that on the wrong problem." "You never said anything," I said. "You weren't ready to hear it. It wasn't mine to say until you were. And now," she poured the last of the wine, "now I think you're going to do something more remarkable than anything you've already built. Because you are finally running without the drag." I raised my glass. She raised hers. "To not shrinking," I said. "To not shrinking," she said. "Some things don't need more words than that." We paid the bill and walked out into the Nashville night. It was warm. It was loud. The city was completely indifferent to the fact that something important had just finished. That felt exactly right. My mother flew up from Charlotte the weekend after the hearing. I had not asked her to come. She called Friday and said, "I booked a flight for Saturday morning," and I said okay. She arrived with 2 overpacked bags, one with clothes, one with groceries, including everything needed for the chicken and rice she had been making since I was a child. The kind of meal that smells like every good memory inside you, stacked on top of each other. We spent Saturday doing nothing deliberate and everything necessary. She sat at the kitchen table while I worked. She walked with me through the neighborhood after dinner. She sat on the porch that evening and let the quiet be quiet. On Sunday morning over coffee, she said, "I want to tell you something I've been holding for a long time." "Tell me," I said. "When you were 9, right after your dad left, you stopped asking for help."
Completely.
"You handled everything on your own. School, friendships, the small crises of being a kid. You just figured it out alone and moved on. I used to watch you and feel so proud and also so scared. Because independence and isolation look almost identical from the outside. And I couldn't always tell which one I was watching." I wrapped both hands around my mug. "You built something real," she said. "Something that cost everything you had. And you built it alone in every way. Because you decided alone was safer. I watched you do that for years. And I was proud. And I also want you to hear me say, alone is not the goal. Alone is just what you do when the alternative has cost too much." "I know that now," I said. "I know you do," she said. "I just needed to say it out loud." She held my hand across the table. Outside the green curtains, the morning light was doing exactly what it always did, arriving without drama, just present, just warm. I thought, this is the best kitchen I have ever sat in. Not because of the kitchen, because of who was in it with me. Derek moved out in June. He had found an apartment in Midtown, a 1-bedroom with good light. He came on a Saturday with a rented truck and a friend I did not know. I stayed in the kitchen while they moved through the house. At the end, he came to say goodbye. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the green curtains. The window over the sink.
Me.
"I always liked this kitchen," he said.
"I know," I said.
He started to say something else.
Decided not to.
Picked up the last bag and walked out. I heard the truck pull away. I sat down at the kitchen table and looked at the curtains and waited to feel the loss. What I felt instead was space.
Room.
The specific lightness of a weight you have been carrying so long you forgot it was there, and then one day you set it down, and the absence of it is so physical it almost knocks you over. The house was mine. It had always been mine. But now it felt like it in every room. About a month later, I received an email from Derek. It said,
"Sloan.
I've been trying to figure out the right words for weeks, and I don't think they exist, so I'm going to say the true ones instead. I was careless with something valuable. I watched myself making the wrong choices, and I kept making them. What I am most ashamed of is not what I did. It is that I had already decided who you were before I actually looked. You deserved someone who kept looking. I wasn't that. I hope what comes next for you is everything you built deserves." I read it twice. I closed the laptop. I went to water the garden, which I had been neglecting all summer and which had consequently grown into something small and chaotic and more alive than anything I had carefully maintained. I did not reply. Not because I was angry. Because some doors are better left exactly as they are.
Closed.
Finished.
Real.
The past was real. The future was mine. In July, I updated Carter Precision's website. For 6 years, the About page had listed Claire prominently and described me as the founding director in language that was technically accurate and humanly invisible. My photograph had never appeared. My full story had never been told. The new page went live on a Tuesday morning. It said, Sloane Carter, founder and CEO. It included my photograph. It described the founding, 21 years old, a second bedroom, a laptop that needed a fan underneath it, an idea I was more certain of than anything I had ever been certain of before. My phone rang more that day than it had in the previous 6 months combined. Point one message was from a woman I had been in a study group with junior year of college, someone I had barely stayed in touch with, who wrote, I always knew you were building something that would matter. I am so glad you're finally saying so out loud. Another was from a client who had been with us for 3 years. We always suspected there was someone exceptional behind this firm. It is good to finally know who. Claire came to my office at the end of the day and set a coffee on my desk without a word. Then she looked at the updated website on my screen.
About time, she said.
About time, I said. I went back to work, but I smiled while I did it, and I did not try to stop. That felt like something. A small private thing. The first of many, Dr. Merritt saw me for my 6-month cardiac follow-up in September. She reviewed the results with her usual thorough, unhurried precision. Then she set down her pen and looked at me. Your readings are significantly better than your initial visit, she said. Heart rate down. Stress markers at the lowest I have recorded for you. I don't usually say things like this because they're hard to measure, but whatever you changed, it is showing up in the data. She tapped the scan. In here. I removed something that was costing me a great deal, I said. Evidently, she said. Keep removing things that cost you that much. I drove home with the windows down in September air that had finally committed to being autumn. Nashville in September is the best Nashville. The heat backing off. The trees beginning to turn at the edges. Everything getting ready to let go of what it no longer needed. I thought about the morning I had sat on the office floor calling the doctor while Derek slept in the other room, and I was managing a cardiac condition and a marriage and a secret company and an investigation all at the same time. I thought about the years of carrying 2 separate lives inside the same body. The cost of that. The sustained, invisible, daily cost of never being fully present anywhere because part of you is always somewhere else. I thought about Derek saying, I thought you had nothing. I thought about Claire saying, you are finally running without the drag. I thought about my mother saying, alone is not the goal. I drove through Nashville with the windows down and the trees starting to turn. I was completely, in every part of me, myself. Not the managed version. Not the compressed version. Not the woman who lived behind a closed door at the end of a hallway. The whole version, it turns out, that is not as heavy as I thought it would be. It turns out it is the lightest thing there is. Carter Precision had its best year on record. We signed 4 new enterprise clients and launched the healthcare supply chain division Claire, and I had been planning for 2 years, but that I had never had the mental space to execute while managing everything else at home. We hired 5 new people, including a 23-year-old analyst named Ashley, who reminded me of exactly who I had been 3 years earlier, sharper than she knew, working twice as hard as anyone noticed, doing excellent work in a room where no one had yet thought to see it. I made a point of seeing her. I put her name on client reports. I brought her into meetings where she could speak for herself. I told her directly, in front of other people, that her analysis on the healthcare division launch was the sharpest thinking I had seen from anyone on the team that quarter. She looked surprised. I remembered exactly what that surprise felt like. In November, I was invited to speak at a Women in Business conference in Nashville. My session was called Building at 21, What It Costs and What It Teaches. I did not prepare a formal speech. I talked honestly. Afterward, a young woman came up to me. She was maybe 24. I've been running my own business for 18 months, she said. I haven't told my boyfriend. I don't know how he'll react. I looked at her for a moment. Tell him, I said. And watch what happens. Not because you owe him the information, because the reaction is the most important information you will ever have about whether he is the right person. What if it changes things? She said. It will, I said. That is the point. What if he can't handle it? Then you find that out now, I said. At 24. Not at 27. Trust me, the earlier you find out, the less it costs you. There is a question I have been asked by women who hear pieces of this story. Was it worth it? The hiding. Did it protect you? Here is the honest answer, not the flattering one. It did not protect me. It protected a version of the marriage that was never fully real, and it cost me years of living as half of myself inside my own home. It cost Derek the chance to know who he had actually married, which is a real cost even if he did not always deserve the knowing. What it did do, and I want to be precise here, was give me 6 years to build something extraordinary on my own terms, without interference, without permission, without having to defend or justify or shrink it for a domestic audience. That freedom had real value. I would not trade Carter precision for an earlier honesty. The company is mine in a way that cannot be diminished. But I could have had both. I could have built the company and been fully known. If I had been braver sooner. If I had trusted that the right person would not need me to be less in order to stay. If I had been willing to find out the answer instead of deciding in advance that I could not afford the question. That is the real lesson. Not about hiding. Not about revealing. About being willing to hear the answer. Even when you are afraid of it. Especially when you are afraid of it, because the answer is the information. And the information, however it arrives, is always better than not knowing. I know that now at 27. I wish I had known it at 24. But late is still arriving. And I am here. I heard about Derek through the loose, persistent network of mutual acquaintances that forms around any relationship and survives it. Pinnacle Solutions had let him go. He had taken a contract position at a smaller firm. He was working by all accounts and keeping to himself. I heard that Brooke had left Pinnacle within a few months of everything coming out. I did not ask for details and did not want them. Our neighbor Greta, retired schoolteacher, 3 houses down, the kind of woman who notices everything and says only what she has decided is worth saying, saw me in the front yard one October Saturday and said, "You look different. Better." "I am better," I said. "I could always tell you were carrying more than your share in that house," she said. "Probably," I said. She patted my arm and walked on. I stood in the front yard in the October morning and thought about what it means to carry something so long that other people can see it from 3 houses away, even when you have convinced yourself it is invisible. I did not feel satisfaction about Derek's situation. I want to be honest about that because this is the part of the story where it would be easy to feel satisfied, and I think it is important to say that I did not. What I felt was something closer to sadness. Not for myself. For the waste of it. A whole marriage built on what we each chose not to say. A man who had something rare and real in his own house and had decided, too early and too easily, that he already knew what it was. Some things you only understand after you have let them go. I hope he understands it. I genuinely do. It has been a year since the hearing. Carter Precision is in the middle of its best revenue quarter ever. Ashley is now leading client calls on her own, and the clients keep requesting her specifically, which I mention to her every time. Claire and I have a standing Monday call. My mother calls on Sunday evenings. There is a woman named Beth from the neighborhood book club who's become a real friend, the kind who shows up without needing to be asked, who leaves when it is time, and who asks good questions in between. I have been asked out 3 times in the past 6 months. I said no to all 3, not with regret, but with the kind of clarity that comes from recently learning what it costs to live incompletely. I am not in a hurry. I am 27 years old. I have time. There is something I have been thinking about since all of this that I want to say directly. If you are building something right now, a company, a career, a skill, a future, and you are hiding it from the person who is supposed to be closest to you because you are afraid of what they will do when they find out, tell them, not because you owe them the information, because their reaction will tell you everything you need to know. The person who is right for you will not shrink when they find out what you are building. They will not feel threatened by it. They will not make quiet jokes that chip away at it over dinner. They will not need you to be smaller, so they can feel large. The right person will look at what you built and say, "Show me everything." That person exists. You deserve to find out whether the one you have is that person. I found out the hard way, but I found out. And finding out, even hard, is always better than not knowing. It is a Sunday morning in October. I am sitting at the kitchen table in my house in East Nashville, Tennessee, with a cup of coffee I made slowly because I had time, and I have learned that having time is something you build, not something that happens to you. The green curtains are catching the morning light. The yard outside is doing what Nashville yards do in October, going gold at the edges, letting go of what the season no longer needs, getting ready to rest and come back better. My mother called last night. We talked for an hour about nothing specific and everything real. I did not watch the clock once. The door to my home office at the end of the hall is open.
It is always open now.
That is a small detail. It is also the whole story. I have thought a great deal about what the secret actually was. Not the company. The company was never the secret. It was a fact, sitting in the open, available to anyone who cared to look. The secret was me. The capable, determined, sometimes frightened, fully alive version of me that I had packed into a room and locked and only visited when no one was watching. She was always there. She was always ready. I was 21 when I started building something worthy of her. I was 27 when I finally let her out. I take a sip of coffee. The light is gold on the curtains. The yard is turning. I built this house. I built this company. I built this life. Every part of it. On my own terms. With my own hands. I am 27 years old. I am completely, wholly, unhurriedly at home in my own life. And I am just getting started. If you are reading this and you have something locked behind a door, open it. The room is better with the light on.